Hi everyone, my name's Anthony Cummins. I'm a historical researcher and author. Now I'm going to tell you today why I chose to rewrite The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Yes, I know, crazy. So, for those who don't know me, basically I deal with samurai and shinobi warfare, Japanese history, and basically Japanese old manuals, and I, with a team, bring them out and we study the ancient ways of samurai. But what most people don't realise is this entails fully understanding Sun Tzu's Art of War. Sun Tzu's Art of War is a foundation stone in Japanese military tactics. So, I set about understanding the art of war. However, no matter how many different versions of the art of war there was no one version that actually pretty much broke down the art of war. To put it basically bluntly, the art of war needs to be studied and rearranged and restructured so that you can understand it and apply it in a military context or even in a historical military context. It's not as straightforward as you think. Why is this? Well, first of all, the text is incomplete. Sun Tzu's text is actually incomplete. Most scholars think it's slightly jumbled, and there's even additions to it. There are also other finds which talk about conversations of Sun Tzu. There's the dog. Sun Tzu says this, but it's not from the Art of War. And then there are even further different finds where extra lines are put in. So there's something that we should understand as Sun Tzu proper, and then there's the external additional Sun Tzu finds. Nobody knows what's the original, so there are 13 chapters in Sun Tzu, but actually in the past they reference 81. They also reference illustrations. Some people think that was 13 chapters kept on 81 bamboo bundles. Some people think that was 81 chapters and only 13 remain. What is well known is the fact that it is incomplete, but what we don't know is how incomplete is it. So there are clearly sections missing that it insinuates or semi-references about a certain topic that isn't there in the Art of War. So first of all, just realise that the Art of War actually has problems at its base level. However, so the next step is, well, surely you can just read the Art of War. Yes, you can read the Art of War, and there are some amazing translations out there. They're absolutely superb and wonderful, and the commentaries are fine. The footnotes are great. Everything is superb. However, no matter how many times you read it, you don't really understand it until you break it down. So I, obviously having to study samurai warfare, went off to find the best Sun Tzu version. So I bought this, bought that, next one, British Museum, this, everything. Reading it. Sawyer's, Ames, there's Cleary, there's loads of translations out there, and there's some great, as I say, footnotes on they think this and they think that. So you're like, hold on a minute, this translation says this, but the other translation says this, and this doesn't match with that, and they are arguing against that, and some even say this guy is wrong because of this ideogram. And you're like, okay, so first of all, Art of War is incomplete. Second, it's possibly edited post Sun Tzu. Third, some people don't even think Sun Tzu exists. Fourth is you've got multiple translations. And fifth is they all sort of disagree at certain points with each other. So you're like left there going, well, so what can I do? I need to really understand the Art of War. So the next bit, there's the illustrated Art of War. So, okay, I'll buy that. Buy the illustrated Art of War. Okay, it's the Art of War retranslated with actually basically some Ming vases in it, or a tapestry from the Ming dynasty, or whatever state of view sort of like time. And you're like, that's not what I want. Translation excellent, footnotes excellent, but it's still the same thing. Another translation, not an explanation. So then I went and got so then I looked at this Art of War comics. I was like, okay, somebody's drawn it out in comic form. I can use that. So I opened it up, had a look through, and it's a wonderful comic. There's lots of bits here, but basically it's the original out of copyright Giles text, which we'll talk about more in a minute, and with pictures. Now, the pictures are not bad. They're great pictures. I don't want to use the term generic to mean negative. However, they don't really explain the Art of War. They give a flavour to the Art of War. So whereas the edition with the Ming vases and gave flavour and like, oh, you felt all Chinese and the font was a little bit Chinese, this comic give you a little bit of that step forward into the world of what possibly it could look like. But it wasn't an explanation. So the next step was going on to academic books and academic journals and other things. You'll be surprised at how few there actually are on the art of war that actually deal with what the art of war says. The main one I used was Deciphering Sun Tzu by a Chinese gentleman, and I'll tell you more about him in the future, because I'm in communication with the author now about, these problems and checking things and make sure we check in the background. But still, I was left with nothing that clearly explains the art of war. What does the art of war teach us? And over the years, I realized people love to say, Sun Tzu says, or Confucius says. And you're like, Sun Tzu says what? What does Sun Tzu say? And they always step up with, the art of war is deception. And my question is, so which deceptions? You mean one of the 14 deceptions of Sun Tzu? Because when he says warfare is the art of deception, he then follows up with 14 sort of deceptions of opposites. And you're like, so which one is it? These couplet type quotes, if you like, in 14 opposites of deception. Is that what you mean? And they're like, oh, I've no idea what you're talking about. Of course you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, because you've not actually studied it. You've read it the same as I've done countless times, reading Sun Tzu and not learning anything. So after years of this and years of trying to find this perfect version of Sun Tzu, I thought, right, I've had enough. I'm going to write it. Now, of course, I've written many, many books. I'm actually up to about my 20th book, properly published, full published book at the moment, depending on where you count in the cycle. They're on pre-orders at the minute. If you include those, we come up to about 20 books. So I was like, right, that's it. I'm going to rewrite Sun Tzu's Art of War. So to be clear, this is not a translation. I am not, with my team, translating the Art of War. My team are Japanese. They would do it from a Japanese perspective. That is incorrect. I am simply collecting every version of the Art of War I can find. Or I have done. This has all been done. It's gone to the publisher. Everything's finished. So it should actually past tense. And what I did was I lined up across all my cupboards the Art of War, and I put a broomstick on top of them on each page, and in rows of the different arts of war I had. And I took a notebook and I read line 1. I went to book 2, read line 1, book 3, line 1, book 4, line 1. And I went all the way through the different translations I had and made notes on the various descriptions they had of it. Then I went to the footnote for that. Any footnote that turns up in every single book, I went to the footnote. The commentators, and I went to every single book that has Chinese commentary, and then I went to every single book that has a modern commentary. So line by line, I went through it. And I after months and months of doing this, day after day after day, I ended up with a big notebook on what actually is for Sun Tzu. And during that period, I'd started typing up into individual lessons. You all right, dog? I never get any space for that dog. It never leaves it. So what I ended up with this massive document of all the lessons of Sun Tzu, everything that is possibly said, but also I had lots of variations. So, for example, the 14 deceptions, one translator says it starts here and the cutoff point is here. Another translator says it starts here. Then there's the 5 uses of fire, or this cuts off here. And another translator said this cuts off here. Then a commentator said this is here. And we've got all these masses of variations, which is that's the key to why people are confused with the art of war. You'll listen to everyone, like, I know the art of war, I've studied it. Ask them a question, and I tell you, they cannot answer it, because I was that person. Read. Actually, it's just so confusing, because you have to go through every single translation, and then every single commentary, and all the footnotes, and they're all, sorry, not all, there is a massive margin of difference between them. So, for example, yin-yang, inyo in Japanese, well, let's go Chinese, yin-yang type job, as you guys know it, positive, negative. Whenever the word yin-yang appears in the art of war, it is talking about different things, and yin-yang changes depending on its context. So, in the position of a mountain, the idea is that yang is the sunny side, yin is the side of shadow. But other translators say, well, the sunny side produces more fodder. So it actually doesn't mean that side of the mountain. It means any side where sun has shone on, fodder has been produced, and therefore cattle can, graze and horses can graze. Other people say it only means south, because in the northern hemisphere, whereas China is in pretty much northern hemisphere there, the sun is on the south, the equator is south. So therefore, wherever you're in the northern hemisphere, you mean south when they say yang, and it means north when they say yin, because north is the furthest away from the sun. And this is just one term that's used everywhere with multiple variations, and then the commentators have variations. So we're at this point where everything is confused, and I've got this all mapped out absolutely 100% in order with everything slotted in the right place. So what I did then is start to build it, and I took no precedence over who had the best translation. Of course, there are translations I trust more. There are translations that are more accessible. I listened to the modern Chinese scholars talk about who they thought was the best Western translator. So, for example, people thought Sawyer was the most accessible because his grammar is very English based, and therefore you can sort of get what's going on. So as long as you trust what he translates, it's much easier to get to. Whereas other ones like Thomas Cleary were much more abstract, but that resembles what the text was like. The text was more abstract. So you've got this idea of who is a better translator, but not who knows Chinese better, who gets the point across. But the problem with that is you either go like the original, which is abstract, or you go more detailed, but then it becomes your interpretation of Sun Tzu, because that's the point. They argue over it. So this mass of bubbling mess, not mess, that's the wrong word. I have all this set down. I decided to then, right, divide there, divide there, divide there, divide there. It's divided into its original 13 chapters, or the standard, the Sun Tzu proper 13 chapters. And then what I've done is lesson 1, bang. Divide where that lesson finishes, lesson 2, bang. And I went all the way through till we've got a couple of hundred lessons, the complete, all of it Art of War, what is considered proper Art of War, meaning the classic text that has been the standard across the different versions found. And there are not so many of them because they were all burned when the first emperor of China came along. He had a mass book burning, and there's not many left, basically. So it's very scant on the ground. We wouldn't know about Sun Tzu if it weren't for a handful of texts. So we've got all this. So what I did then is where there are variants, i.e. does it mean the sunny side, the shady side, the south side, the north side, or areas with fodder and areas without fodder? So you've got actually 6 points there for yin yang. So what I did is lesson 20, version 1, version 2, version 3. Lesson 21, version 1, version 2. Lesson 22, all the same. Every translator translates the same. Lesson 23, version 1, version 2. So as you can see, I didn't take precedence on any translator. I put them all in, and then even say at the bottom, like the ancient Chinese commentator, whoever, literally, says this about it as well. So we've got version 1, version 2, version 3. Chinese commentator says this. This Chinese commentator says this. And I've put it all together, and then we've edited it, made it all very, very clear so that you go through and you go, okay, I need to read a book on Sun Tzu, and it's got to teach me how to do battle according to Sun Tzu's school. So I've gone through it, everything's there. So when you guys get it, and the physical book does not exist yet, I am talking now in February 2019. The book will be out in October 2019. So if you're past October 2019, you should have the physical book in your hands. But as I'm speaking, it doesn't exist. It's now being edited by the guy. So it's all going through. But to add to that, what we did then was I got the illustrious Jason Kane, my graphic designer guy who helps me with different graphics. I got him to create the lessons, and there are masses of illustrations for this book. Now, a lot of the time, Sun Tzu is about concepts. So most of the time, you've got this idea of there's a concept. So we've designed an image that shows you that concept. And what I've done is I've created a 3-tier system. 3 or 4 tier system, depending how you do it. But basically, the lesson has a title. So, for example, the 14 deceptions of Sun Tzu. There's then an illustration that highlights the concept of 14 deceptions, which possibly it's either got commentary in, or sometimes now the editor is blending my commentary into the main text. You've then got the main text, and then you've got a roundup at the bottom of what it is. So it should be title tells you what it is, image tells you what it is, main text tells you what it is, and then a sort of hint stroke, simplified version tells you what it is. So each lesson comes in a multiple wave format with variations that are very, very, very easy to understand and very easy for you to process. So for example, when it talks about the 9 different terrains, it's like, okay, the 9 terrains. What are the 9 terrains? People are like, oh, it's, this terrain and that. And you're like, what are they? We don't, most people forget because Sun Tzu lists them. He then lists what they are. So he gives you the list of names, 9 names. He then gives you 9 names with descriptions. And then he gives you what you should do on there. So you've got to try and remember what the name is, go to the sort of description and then find out what you've got to do. But it's not independent. It's all 9 at once, all 9 at once, all 9 at once. What I've done is gone, name, take a out, put there. Description, put there. What you should do, put there. That's number 1. Number 2, out, 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 2. Variation, variation. 3. So now it's very, very easy to understand. It's very easy to get your head round. So that is where we're at. Between now, which is February 2019, and October, I will be producing 1-minute videos on Sun Tzu tactics. There'll probably be about 20, maybe 15 to 20 of them to show you these different types of lessons and help promote the book. So basically, guys, that is my explanation of why I have rewritten Sun Tzu's Art of War, because there isn't a book out there that was good enough for me to really get my teeth in and understand the art of war. Now, I'm going to reiterate, there are loads of excellent translations, wonderful translations, but that doesn't mean you understand the art of war. Understanding the art of war means it's been digested for you, it's been chewed up and chewed back out and put into by me for you, so that you guys can get it and go, Sun Tzu says, and then actually say something useful and proper and actually what Sun Tzu says. So the next time somebody says, Sun Tzu says the art of war is deception, you say, well, which of the 14 deceptions do you prefer? And then watch them back struggle and go, So, for example, the 9 terrains, it says, Sun Tzu says there is, I did it myself, Sun Tzu says. So Sun Tzu says there is basically terrain that is on your borderland and the enemy's borderland. And once you cross over into enemy borderland, it's very easy for your army to duck back across. So if they start getting scared, or the farmers, because it's conscription in ancient China, they start jumping across, then you'll lose your army. So therefore, steer away from those borders and get deeper into enemy territory, because it's very difficult for a small group of people to say, let's march 50 miles across enemy territory to get into our own lands away from the safety of the army, versus the border's like literally less than a mile that way. We can get there in less than half an hour. Do you want to go, lads? Because I'm not doing what this chap says. And off they go. That's one of the 9 terrains, and that's what it's about and what you do with that. That's the point I'm trying to make. So next time you get Sun Tzu says, you can start, hopefully, to say, well, actually, he says this. There's only one thing I'd like to leave you with, which is a little bit disappointing. Not disappointing, but it annoys me, is the publisher then comes on board and says, well, we're doing this, Anthony, and this has to happen. And they said to make it complete, because they looked at it and they're like, this is excellent. It's literally the complete art of war, proper. Remember what is considered the classic. I do talk about the other versions. But basically, the actual format is the Art of War Classic, as said by Chinese scholars at the minute. It's the proper Art of War. Until that is changed, I will stick to that. But they said, Anthony, to make it more complete, we need to put a translation of the Art of War. And I said, well, my team doesn't do Chinese translations. They don't do it. And this is an independent, I'm doing this independently of the team. So there's no way to translate another Art of War. So they went off and started to talk to different translators and said, can we use your version, or how much? And then it becomes a very sort of annoying game of the publisher, where they want 50% of your rights, or they want upfront a ridiculous amount to be paid before you can use it, and it is literally the smallest amount of the text. So we ended up having to go with the domain free, the copyright free Giles text. But I want to stipulate that it might have the Giles text in it, which was written in the early 1900s, And I actually, after doing this research, respect Giles much more. His version is not ridiculously bad. It's pretty good, actually. But of course, in the last 100 years, our understanding has come on a long way. So now my book has the copyright-free Giles in it, just to anchor where you are. So basically, it's used as a reference. It's not the translation we want, but you can use it as a reference to say, okay, I'm here at the Art of War, and these are the lessons. Then it says, you know, the Giles text here. Okay, that's where I am. But of course, the lessons don't reflect the Giles text. The lessons reflect everything put together. So that's the only bit that's grated on me a bit, is because that's a publisher move. I said I don't want it. I said I don't want this. And then they say, we don't care what you want, Anthony. And they slapped me and then threw me in a cell and said nobody cares, which is what publishers do. Publishers have small dungeons underneath where authors are kept. This is one of them. I just decorated this one, and they don't let you out. That's it. And, you know, you're like, please change my cover. Actually, the cover is pretty mint. I'll be honest with you. The idea came from Fiona, which is the commissioning editor of Watkins, and she liked it. And we were just chatting, and she came up with the chess pieces ideas, I think, or we were discussing it. And I'm still getting used to my iPad, so I don't know about adding pictures, but I'll put the cover here. So if it appears here now, then I've worked out the button to press to get in the edit. So this is the cover. I think it's wonderful. The link will be down below for the book, so please click the link and enjoy and get the book on pre-order, because you get the special pre-order price, of course, and then enjoy it and let me know what you think in the comments below. My name's Anthony Cummins. I'm looking forward to October when the book is out, and I'm looking forward to you guys getting to be able to say Sun Tzu says and actually having a bit of welly behind it to actually understand what he says.